Nicole Johnson. How are you?
Hi. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Jennifer.
Oh my God. So grateful to be here. So pumped for this conversation. Before we dive on in, for those listeners who do not know who you are, what you do, all those things, who are you today?
Yeah. Well, today I am very excited to get closer to my vacation. I will say that. I am I think a busy bee, I think all of the time when it comes to my diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And today I'm in that space where I need to make sure that I'm taking care of myself and setting time aside for me to really get grounded again. So that's my honest answer to your question. But I also
please.
am a diversity, equity, inclusion director across theater, in regional Broadway, and in executive kind of administrative settings. I also am a consultant across other industries like corporate, higher ed, K through 12, houses of worship, and I am the founder of Harriet Tubman Effect, which is a research institute that focuses on dismantling systemic oppression. That's a little bit.
I mean, yeah, clearly you're not doing any important work whatsoever on a daily basis. So clearly none to occupy your time.
Yeah. And, I think it's really useful to also say the other things about me, that I am a writer and a creative and a ukulele player, and things that should have really been at the forefront. But it's so interesting that work always seems to be the way that we introduce ourselves. So I thought I would start there.
Yeah, that's why I always ask who are you today? Because I feel like it's a choose your own adventure, and eventually people are like, oh no, but wait, also, this is actually more of who I am today. I'm drinking tea. I'm, like I walked my dog, whatever it was. And then it's a bit of a reminder, hopefully, to be like, I'm also a full-fledged human being who's living and breathing on this planet.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Appreciate it.
Of course. Oh my gosh, always. I'm curious about how you have ended up in this space very prominently, in terms of like the work that you do as opposed to just being incorporated in other parts of your life.
Yeah. It's an interesting journey. I think particularly in the past 3 years, things have expedited. So I definitely wasn't in this exact positioning, before the pandemic. And the pandemic is a large part of my success story, to tell you the truth. But I started off as an ensemble dancer, and I did lots of regional productions right out of high school. And I was also a student at NYU at the same time, studying ethics and social entrepreneurship while I was working. And I was really actually frustrated with the tension between my ethics degree and the work that I was doing on regional contracts, and the difficulty in just recognizing the caste system that so existed in 2010. And, you can imagine before my time as like an ensemble, like regional theater, non-union kid, probably much worse for others before me. But I was having a really large struggle reconciling the ethics and morality and the aspirations I had for myself and my workplaces with the reality of my gigs, where I was making like $250 a week on like rigged stages and stuff like that, where your body is just falling apart at 19. And so I finished college in like 2014, my undergrad, and did one more tour, and was like, before, like literally, I remember at my graduation saying, you're going to go do this tour. Cause I remember not being able to experience my graduation because I had to leave right after. And that sounds like such a privileged thing to be like, you booked a tour and then you had to you were feeling all weird about it. But I was all like, I was having a hard time. I was all like, I had just completed this degree around ethics and social entrepreneurship. Now I'm going to go on this tour that I know my body is not ready for, and I am not entirely excited about the culture that I might step into, or perhaps I didn't even know what I was going to step into. But I told myself as I was leaving graduation, I was like, that's going to be it. This is going to be the end of you're not going to do it. And so I left the industry after that tour, and I went to work in city government. I started for the Department for the Aging, working with friendly visiting coordination, where I would bring volunteers to older adults' homes in hopes of just supporting them. And I even had a relationship myself during that time with an older adult in my neighborhood. And then I moved on to work for Bill de Blasio's administration in the Department of Health and the Community Affairs Office, focusing on mental health. Made my way to Department of Ed And all the while, I was doing a lot of work with my own nonprofit, which was called M.O.V.E, Motivation, Opportunity, Vision, Entertainment, and supporting young people in creating art that is socially responsible, that addresses social issues creatively. And I was really loving that charge in my life. Honestly, I really did love it. And I decided right before the pandemic that I was going to go back into the theater industry as a director of operations at a musical theater studio, where I experienced the most amount of like racial gaslighting and bigotry and other forms of just like social workplace pressures while I was working there through the George Floyd murder.
Oof.
As the only Black person in a predominantly white office for predominantly white musical theater students. And it's the thing that broke me entirely in the middle of the pandemic, working 7 days a week. And when I left that job, it kind of birthed this relationship with Harriet, the figure. Harriet Tubman has like served as a historical figure that I do a lot of research around her strategy and her courage. And it activated the building of the nonprofit or the nonprofit arm and the for-profit arm of Harriet Tubman Effect, which now is my main go-to every day. And I work there with some great researchers. It's a pretty ridiculous, but it feels good to be at this part of the story now where, you know.
But I think context is so helpful, especially when it comes to this kind of work, because it usually and hopefully stems from a place of hardcore values. Because to do it on a daily basis it's a heavy lift, I can only imagine, and to not really be grounded in why you keep going back and the need and the desire and the want, which I imagine is also desperately heavy at times. If you don't have that somewhere inside you, then it does become a form of work without it having meaning. And then it just becomes another job, which is not what this is.
Yeah, the values. I mean, our core values: resisting white supremacy culture, research is learning, creating relevant work, activating a culture of empathy, and then reallocating wealth. Literally, because I use those as a CEO, as like a young Black female cis, CEO, it's very transforming because you recognize the amount of white supremacy that is inside your body, the white supremacy culture of perfectionism and defensiveness and power hoarding. And so as I make decisions and I have to call myself back to those values and I tell the story about why these are the values we chose so that we could pretty much conjure up the Harriet Tubman effect in modern day, it's such a fun challenge every day. There's every single thing I do as a leader. I'm like, wait a second, let me go back to that value. Let me hold myself accountable. And then I just see it transform so many people around me. So I think if anything, it feels like it's like this huge adventure that is in front of me to hold these values and then to try to bring them to life every day. It feels like it's called, you know what? It's the ultimate swing journey for me because I used to be a swing.
Okay.
And I love a good like challenge. And so I feel like this is my version of swinging in many ways.
I love that. I love all of this so much. For those listening, obviously you mentioned it in passing, but let's talk a bit more about what the Harriet Tubman Effect as an organization does, how it's worked thus far, maybe perhaps what you are hoping that it can continue to become, so that we have context as we continue developing into this conversation.
For sure. So yes, the Harriet Tubman Effect Institute is an institute for participatory action research and reallocation to Black and Brown diversity, equity, and inclusion leaders. Our goal is primarily to dismantle systemic oppression across American industries through those values: resisting white supremacy culture, research is learning, creating relevant work, activating a culture of empathy, and then reallocation of wealth. We are such a heady organization. We spend a lot of time thinking. But our research and our resources are communal in that instead of the unsustainable way of me going in as an individual to a Broadway show to simply be the only person who is trying to act DEI in a space, we then instead, the communal aspect asks us all to come together, a lot to bring identities and research lines to help a particular organization or industry navigate their journey in dismantling systemic oppression. There's about 45 to 50 HTE researchers, they're called justice advocates, who are fellows, who are Black and brown people who are working within predominantly white institutions, and then founders, people like me, who have the quality of life of several people underneath our leadership. All of us come together to strategize around things weekly. We offer resources, we offer classes, activities, and events, but then sometimes we literally activate diversity, equity, and inclusion stops in the midst of an institution as people are experiencing violent workplace conditions. So we've gotten called in for a lot of things, but the goal really is to dismantle systemic oppression. So obviously there are so many pathways that we could go down with our work and our power.
Yeah. So is it a chicken or the egg in this situation? Do people reach out to you all and say, hey, I'm mounting a Broadway show. We want you to come in while we're doing table reads to talk about this and create a space? Is it more like, hey, I know y'all are coming down the pipeline. I see that this tends to be a team that I wonder if you could benefit from this when you start this process. Would you mind that we come in? What is the order, and is there an order?
Yeah, there is. I wouldn't say there's a direct order, but I will say I get called in majority of the time. Now, I say that when I'm responding to that question in particular, I am a diversity, equity, inclusion director, apart from my relationship to Harriet Tubman Effect, where I am a founder. It's an egalitarian space. So there are 15 founders, and then maybe about 20 justice advocates, and then the rest of us are fellows. And it's a growing community, right? Because there are people who are not at the core just yet, but are in other parts of our programming. But nonetheless, as a founder at Harriet Tubman Effect, I am just a part of a larger community of people who are trying to help several industries navigate dismantling systemic oppression with our resources. But in my separate work as a diversity, equity, inclusion director, I work just like a director would on Broadway, or a PT, a physical therapist on Broadway, or I'm trying to think of other roles, a choreographer on Broadway, right? People will literally just call me because of the fact that you worked on this other show. Can you jump on ours? I have not done much, in my opinion, in the past 2 years. I have not done much outreach on my own app.
I would imagine.
People are just calling me. It's very cool, though. Get a call from a random theater in the middle of Virginia saying, hey, I got your number from someone else. Would you be open to jumping on with us? But when it comes to our very intensive programs, like our New World program that holds people accountable on a weekly basis, we do have to do a lot of outreach. We have to say, hey, are you interested in a committed program that's going to hold you accountable to shifting your behaviors and your systems? This is what it entails. Would you like to join us? So it depends on the resource. I know a lot of people are looking for that reactionary stuff, though. Like Broadway shows need a DEI person these days. And so that's why I think it's so easy for me to get the call.
Yeah. Well, that is the thing that I guess I want to understand, because, and this is touchy, but here we are. We are in a culture right now where, for better or for worse, people are at least more aware that like DEI as a thing needs to be incorporated, which is wonderful, because at least the conversation is now starting in a way that it should have started and or never have been needed to begin with, but that's whatever. So with that said, how do we hold spaces accountable that, whether systemically or whatever it has been, like has been held in these antiquated ways for so long that it requires a lot of undoing and relearning? How do we hold that when so many people are on different parts of their journey through understanding what this all means, have experienced like different lives and intersectionalities in that, and then they're all congregating in said space to share said hopefully safe space? How do you navigate? I mean, that's literally your job. So I mean, like, I imagine there's many ways, but like, how does one do, it's the accountability part, I think, is the part that I just keep in my brain coming back to, because a lot of it just feels like lip service. And how do we separate the efforts from the tactile, tangible shifts?
Right. Well, I will say that this particular industry might have gone under the radar for diversity, equity, and inclusion a lot longer than other industries. DEI has been around in other spaces. There are leaders who have had my role as part of their HR responsibilities. I think we decided to not have a human resource part of our industry whatsoever. Therefore, there was never any kind of conversation about DEI because everyone's like, this is family and these are the people I love. And there's just this culture, which was dangerous. I think then our bubble burst in a very interesting way in 2020. And accountability, and I'll be very honest, feels more like a 10th grade thing. And we are working in 2nd and 3rd grade when it comes to this industry. Yeah. People liken, or I liken my work to being a 2nd or 3rd grade, 1st grade teacher. I'm very graceful and not like nice aesthetically. I'm talking about like the grace I offer people. I offer a lot of people grace because I focus on the neuroscience of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I didn't mention that I'm currently navigating my PhD at NYU in educational theater.
Yes. Okay. You do nothing with your time. Oh my God.
No, so I do a little that, but I'm focusing on the neuroscience of diversity, equity, and inclusion and behavioral change. And sustainability, honestly, in our ability to keep showing up for the work. And you have to really figure out what's happening in your body. It's a full body experience to hold yourself accountable to a shift. Right? It's like you're reckoning with your identity, with your history, with your imagination or lack thereof imagination, with your ability to understand your windows of influence and the people around you. And then, of course, your impact, like what message you're actually sharing, what values you have, and then your initiative, like, how am I going to keep it going? All of those things are a part of our like personal psyche. It's about our mind, body, our spirit. And so I spend a lot of time there with people in this industry because the large scale systemic shifts, like building in a human resource center or a human resource department for any of our history, or the issues around retention and hiring, the issues around just basic clarity and equity, role of finances, transparency, just like all of those things. There are like no systems. I will say that there are systems, but they're kind of like this very formal, this is just how we're going to do it. And we're going to put it together. And then it's going to keep transforming over the years. And then all of a sudden, no one knows how to navigate accessible ticketing at the box office because no one has ever really thought about building a system for it. Other industries have actively sought to like build upwards. So they have to build systems extremely like with intention. Whereas I think we're building a lot of this. We're artists. So we're like growing together and they're like, how do you just get things? So it's I feel like to answer the question, and we could have answered it in so many ways. My job is certainly to be a diversity, equity, inclusion director in these spaces, that I assess the systems that are in place. Sometimes I build new systems like my accessible ticketing initiative or like affinity groups within a workspace, right? Or I build out policy and I help people walk through that policy, navigate building surveys around COVID interest and like what people want to do backstage. I build a lot of systems. I maintain a lot of systems.
And are you building these specifically for what is of need for these projects or these people? Okay.
Yeah. And, the earlier I can get in, the better. Right. So there's a show like, so I'm on Sweeney now. We're in much earlier talks because I've worked with this team before and we all have decided we're going to start earlier than we normally do. Right. Whereas normally people are like, the show's starting next week. Did we get everything? Okay, let's just jump in. But the prevention work is what I do because I need to build some systems. All that being said, as an industry, we don't have larger accountability outside of like, even our larger institutions, Broadway Association, Broadway League, American Theater Wing, they are not governing the community, even if some people feel that they are the top of our community. So therefore, people are just kind of walking around ungoverned or unsupported because, people don't like sometimes to be governed. But I'm like, no, it would be really useful if we had some understanding of who we are to one another. Yes. So there's things that I do that are directly from program of the work I'm doing, like directly at the show. And then there are policy changes that I'm seeking to shift so that we have some greater shared language. And then there's sometimes just like straight up individual saving people from horrible conditions, right? So I wish there was a job description for what I do.
Oh, yeah, it's such an individualized situation, and I think for me, it's just like, as I, from where I sit, just like looking at so many broken things, it's like, how do we fix the things that are broken and the people that have been harmed, and just like, how do we make sure or try to ensure that that doesn't happen again? And just, I think the word accountability is the only one that I can I think to go to. But it's also like, yeah, if you don't have a governing body in any capacity that oversees all these structures, it really is a free for all. And like within each individualized project. It's just, yeah, it's just so complicated.
It is. And that's why I think I say, instead of like, how do we hold the entire industry accountable? I think it's very much about being present in the thing that you are connected to right now, your window of influence, the people who are around you, the situations that are around you, right? If we're all committed individually to shifting our own behavior and the people and the things that we touch, we will then collectively change the industry. For right now, it's like, I'm about the individual, because if I can help several individuals advocate for themselves, work on their self, work on how they articulate themselves, how they hold themselves accountable to values, right? We're like literally activating a movement that might shift and hold the larger city of New York, who is responsible for our mental health. Like, that is a governing body that could be helping us. We might get to enough shared knowledge to figure out together that we need that governing body. But it's the culture versus the system thing.
Right.
That if we put a system in place, that this industry would culturally be ready. A lot of people are still very much living the life that has been beneficial for them in this industry. And everyone's like, yeah, I really want that change. But I'm like, actually, I'm pretty sure that that change is going to ask you to sacrifice. I have to like start acting differently. So I think, the culture work and the individual work is start, and probably where I will be for a very long time. And that's kind of like what second and third grade teachers do. They just spend a lot of time with you as an individual. It's like, don't worry about those larger scale problems right now. I just want you to like figure out how to say please and thank you and engage in a conversation with your friend and, stuff like that.
Wow. Okay. So let's go to the individual then.
Yeah.
How or what are some tools, or if I was a student of yours, a second grader that you were speaking to, how or what might you say to me to begin my journey of hopefully starting to improve the way in which I communicate and show up and advocate and be a better ally, or whatever my mission is in this particular moment? What are some of these things that I might maybe do? And you can totally talk to me like a second grader or first grader if I need to be demoted. That's totally cool.
No, totally. Second graders are the coolest, but then I also want to make sure that no one feels demeaned by that understanding of being someone in a lower grade. There's something about second grade and this work, honestly, that is so adventurous, and there are not huge rules, and your homework is not horrible, that it does require you to focus on yourself. And understanding your awareness, right? It's like, I think it's like interesting, that metaphor of second grade is very much like, it's the first time that you are responsible for your homework, maybe a little bit more. You're responsible for yourself, responsible for getting the signature from your parents or your parent to come in, right? I think the first thing is really to understand your identity. This is the 5 steps I'm going to share are from our EDIFY curriculum, which is the curriculum that I'm pretty well known for. My friend Belen Moyano has been such an outstanding collaborator. Both of us left that workplace that I was pretty tragic for us. And we kind of like birthed this curriculum, and it's called EDIFY. It comes with a phone app that's available on iOS and Android, and you could look it up it's like the Harriet Tubman Effect app. But EDIFY is the curriculum. 5 steps for dismantling systemic oppression. Your first thing is to know that your identity is, in fact, probably the largest component of your advocacy story. People are always like, oh, what about that community? Do I need more in that community? I'm also like, you really need information about yourself. Where did you grow up? What are your prejudices? What's your unconscious bias? How are you working on your vocabulary? What do you know? What do you do not know? All of those things are essential, and it comes in the form of reflection and writing. I love a good morning pages, right? Of just like throwing all of your thoughts onto the page. What's a moment in my history that I am proud of when it comes to my ad, and one that I'm not so proud of, right? Who are the people that are close to me as I look around? Is there intersectionality in the people that I've connected with? Am I working with like a bit of like a homogenous group of friends, of family, of coworkers? There's some self-awareness work in your identity. You know, being able to engage in self-reflection around how your identity intersects with the identity of a marginalized community is the most important part of that step, which then leads you to imagination and understanding what you know, what you don't know, the questions you need to be asking, specifically about your marginalized community that you perhaps want to advocate for, but also about yourself. What are some things that you just have not spent enough time unpacking about the way that you behave in a workplace, about why you are in this industry in the first place, about why you want to hold particular values? You got to engage in your imagination. And then it's about influence, taking all of that lovely information from identity and imagination and understanding that you have a window of influence around you that is specific to you. How are you going to use those windows of influence when you cultivate your impact or your very clear messaging of the like, I am interested in bringing more resources for accessibility in a workspace. I'd like to support the deaf and hard of hearing community, the visually impaired and blind. And as a director, I actually want to incorporate understanding of these communities in all parts of the process, right? That's your like impact, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then it's about your initiative, your last step. How do I keep it moving? How do I like not just do it for this show, but make sure that I have all the resources and the people and the information I need to make it sustainable in my workplaces every time I go to another show, right? And I feel like that is the way. I don't speak to second graders like that, but I speak to second grade adults in this work like that, where I say, if you can engage with those 5 steps on a consistent basis and make it a rhythm, you're going to be kind of excavating, you're breaking down all the cognitive frames in your body that have been withholding or making you hesitate when it comes to the work.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes we forget that your relationship with yourself literally can hinder your impact.
Mm-hmm.
And that might be the beginning, but then there's a lot of grace and a lot of stories that I tell about other people who have done it, people in our history, people who are doing it now, that help to kind of encourage you, make you feel good about the fact that you're deciding to step into those 5 steps. And that it can become like just a part of the way that you go about your life, just like being that much more aware of your ability to make change.
Yeah. These are so helpful. Are you suggesting in an ideal world that every morning, say with your morning pages, you have these questions and you are rechecking in with yourself on a daily basis of like the needle is moving very, very small in this way, but at least I'm aware and checking in that this is where I'm working, or this is the area that now I'm going to have to focus on, or this I need to cultivate more. So on like a daily basis.
Yeah. And I think it's more so of certainly that, but I would be in community with people who can check you first.
Great.
Do all of that work in community. So a lot of people did the workshops throughout the quarantine, and then everyone decided to go back to work. So I was surprised at how many people in positions of power had not continuous work after the initial kind of awakening. I knew that it was going to be trendy for some people, but I didn't expect the people that I have now been interacting with in this industry. I was all like, wow, I didn't expect it to be that much of a fall off. Or I thought that you all would have at least gone to another class beyond the first one that you did, or beyond the first 2 or 3. So I think it's about being in community, about having an accountability partner, about knowing that there are lots of options for you to keep tapping in so that you're not just with yourself. You got to be held accountable in a very intentional way. And you can only do that with someone else who's all like, what are your values? Okay, I'm going to hold you accountable to those. You need to be in community around it.
Yeah. I think that is perhaps many people's form of like part of resistance for it, which is like, it does feel really overwhelming, right? Because how can I, as one person, dismantle all these things? And I
Right.
love the idea of bringing it back to yourself of, we all do have a circle of influence. We all do have a community. We've all come from somewhere. And
Right.
in a power of numbers moment, if every single person in an ideal world is going into their own sphere and seeing where that exists, and then you are able to come together in a way to
Exactly.
start to expand from that, it is a ripple effect. And I think that's such a helpful shift, so that it doesn't go from this macro level. It does. It starts with you. I know for myself, I can get really overwhelmed with, I want to fix it all. And then it feels like
Yeah.
a form of paralysis. And it's like, well, what is the first step? And this
Yeah.
idea to just go take some reflection of who you are. What do you believe? Who do you know? Who are you surrounding
Yeah.
yourself with? All of those things is just a baseline, and then go and expand to the other 4 steps from that, I think is such a wonderful way to get in touch with what is real for you.
Yeah. I mean, you're the only person you can control. So it's like, why, in some instances, there's these thoughts around being a persuader of others. And yes, that comes when you have kind of mastered the understanding of self, or at least understand your own patterns, your ups and your downs, right? I'm very passionate about knowing that EDIFY has certainly been a transformative curriculum for me, but there's need for other kinds of curriculums as well. So there are some healing curriculums that we've developed that recognize that for POC, we have some other work that we got to do. There's like some ancestral healing and work in our epigenetics and understanding generational trauma and understanding who we are historically, relationship that we have to the people around us, and the fear aspects. We have a lot of work that we also have to do. What I just shared was a lot of like advocacy work that
Mhm.
I know would have not worked out had I not done some of my personal healing work. So before I could EDIFY, I was in like a bit of a personal hole of self-discovery. So it was like as if that identity step was like 55 times larger, right? I was spending time with the like basic self-hatred and navigating my limbic system, and I express myself to myself and understanding my beauty and understanding my meditation practice. Like I was deep in that in order to be prepared to start the first of EDIFY, right?
Mhm.
And I know that there was some deep work that I needed to do as a person of color, or as just like Nicole Johnson. I won't speak on behalf of all people, but I do know that there's some stuff in my generation that I needed to uncover, that I need to like connect with my ancestry. I had to do it in the form of song, lots of
Mhm.
ukulele playing, a lot of like just adventuring with someone that I had denied a lot by being a part of a white supremacist culture. You
Yeah.
deny yourself consistently to be a part of this race. And some of us got to spend a lot more time with ourselves to catch up. I'm really happy that I got a chance to catch it before I turned 30. I was like, great. At least I'm not, at least I won't do this, this stuff
Yeah.
until I'm 40 or something like that.
But it's also, I think in an ideal world also, we're consistently growing, so hopefully this is, a practice that from where you are now, you're continuing to excavate some more beauty, and it does it. Maybe
Yeah.
it's not as heavy, or maybe the type of heavy just becomes a different type of heavy, and then it doesn't feel as
Yeah.
heavy. I mean, it all hopefully morphs. I mean,
Mhm.
that is the beauty of being a human on this planet, is that part at least isn't, it doesn't just
It's true.
stick
No, it's
if you
good.
work.
Yeah, no. I think it's a much better lens, or shift in the narrative to say it like that. There is like, and even just the idea of working through your healing as a Black woman, I think there is a sort of self-forgiveness that you have to engage with, right? Because you get to a point in your journey where you're like, what would have been before, and you go through the weird regret stuff, right, for past versions of yourself. And you have to certainly be much more self-compassionate and graceful to know that we are more so in an evolution, and that there's no like time lost or anything like that. But that's, you know, it's the deep work of being with yourself, that you're going to have those thoughts and then you just self-correct for a solution. Like, it's okay. Be compassionate with yourself, right? And yeah, I mean, honestly, that's part of another list of 5 steps that I could give people, because I do have thoughts around how you get to self-correcting in the way that you just helped me to self-correct. But that's the beauty of this, is that like when we're in community with people, you hear another thought that says, oh yeah, actually shift that narrative, shift that language. It's really good.
Yeah. I guess that I want to go there, though. You don't have to necessarily share those 5 steps, because people should come and work with all of you and get your app. But
yeah, because we're doing a lot.
No, but also like, you know, keep what you need to keep and, you know, save the rest. But I do want to talk about that judgment aspect of it. So let's say somebody is like, you know what, I'm listening to this, and I wanted to figure out a way for me to learn how to be better. And I'm going to start by, say, doing these morning pages or reflecting about myself. When one starts to unpack or unveil some arguably harder things and realities about one's circle or one's identity or one's biases, what are some tools that you found to be helpful about like receiving it not as a judgment, but being able to just be like, this is what it is, and therefore now I can make it this, or I can learn for this to take up space in a different way that doesn't feel as much of like a self-judgment?
Yeah, it's the storytelling. I will first start off though with a good old plug for meditation. I think meditation personally it's a part of the work that we do in Harriet Tubman Effect. We have a moment at the beginning of every session. Like, so no matter who is leading, we all know that we have a moment to take people through a stretch and a meditation. And then we ask people to like bring their hands together and heat to their palms and think about something that either brings them clarity, joy, confidence, courage, and then place their hands on a place where they normally feel stress and kind of like give that to yourself, give yourself that theme or that lesson, right? Because you're imagining something and then you offer it to yourself. So that very simple thing is a reminder, ideally, that people will do that. But there's not enough in our brain to hold the judgment and shame and guilt and all those things while you're also doing the work. You have to find methods by which you can mitigate and rid yourself of shame. And meditation literally does that for us physically in its neuroscience, right? Like in our ability to have additional gray matter. I think there's a part of us that meditation as a tool is something that I'm really excited to continue to explore. But then it also allows you to step out of the meditation and ask yourself more generative questions that are going to lead you towards additional strength or courage. It takes you on a different route than the day that you didn't do your meditation. It happens to me every single time. I'm all like, this day, I know the difference between Thursday when I didn't meditate and Friday when I did, right?
Yeah.
And then I know the difference between Saturday and Sunday when I decided to meditate again. There's just this additional space in your mind to engage with things that are harder. And sometimes when that judgment comes at you, or you feel a sense of self-judgment or being judged, right? Ideally, you're in community where everyone is taking the time to open up their brains and their hearts for a more generative line of living, so that when you're in a room with someone, you're not exercising judgment. And you're also like, no, how about I choose self-compassion today? We have to give ourselves a head start at doing this work. And we got to know that a lot of it is happening in our brain and in our limbic system. So if you can set yourself up for a better day, go ahead and do it. If that means that you need to sit down and have breakfast, that means that you need to I have like a little gratitude tree where I put
cute.
I like have a leaf, write something on it. And so this one says, what you're thankful for. I'm thankful for my nail salon.
Yes.
So, you know,
y'all, if you tune into the YouTube, you'll see it's like, did you make this little gratitude tree? It's like a little like wooden crafted, you've like put little leaves on it. I love it.
I didn't make it. I found it at Target, but nonetheless, it's I know we're hoping to have some for Harriet Tubman Effect that we could send to people like that. But when I do my gratitude work, I have like a guided book for everyday grace I go through. I know I'm setting myself up for the opposite of judgment, right? And then ideally my friends and colleagues are doing the same. So then there's no like exercise judgment at me. But then there's also the ability to advocate for yourself and to ask for a shift in the language when it does happen to you. You're in a room and you're feeling this sense of like the way that people are communicating about an instance that might have been embarrassing, or an instance that was, that you might have made a mistake around a DEI issue or something. And someone is like berating you in a way. It's about the like, advocate for myself in this moment. How can I call us all back to our values? How can I, and if there are no values, then it's about asking for some values in the space, because everyone wants to be a bit further. Everyone wants to be more generative. I think we collectively can say we want to be better people, right? So if we can hold ourselves accountable to that in our community and of course ourselves, that's the way to go.
Yeah. What about when mistakes are made? I think that's another thing. There's like the fear around even making them. The fear around even making the mistake prevents people from even doing any of it because they don't want to mess up in the process.
Yeah.
I have been guilty of that. And that's like the thing that I keep reminding myself and hopefully like trying to lean into, which is like, you are going to fall on your face as you keep trying this, and you are going to make mistakes. What do you recommend in those moments?
Yeah. We do, honestly, our love of grace seems to keep coming up as I think about these questions you're asking me. But we ask people to be courageous and to be daring when it comes to holding yourself accountable and trying new things that are related to shifting systems, right? We're like, go ahead and try it. If your intuition is asking you, if your intuition is saying, hey, but what about, right? Then follow your intuition. And then people don't want to make the mistake because they feel a sense of, you have to like do the thing where you deduct the reasoning there. It's like you're going to make a mistake, and then what? People are going to perhaps hate you. People are going to make you feel like you're less than, all of the things. And you kind of like go through that list, and you have to ask yourself, what is really true about that? What is true about these 15 things that I'm imagining, right? That I'm using my imagination, which is such a powerful skill. I'm using it to think about all the negative things that are going to happen. How can I use my imagination to think about all the amazing things that could happen if they did? If something happened positively with your choice to advocate, with your choice to try, right? And I think if there's a lot of fear, so you're just trying to mitigate the fear there. And that's why grace and compassion is so useful. That's why relationship is so useful. So like, it's much easier for you, Jennifer, who we just met, for you to be like, am I going to offend Nicole but if we choose to both engage in the relationship, to say, I want to know this person and I'm going to show up and connect with them, and then I'm going to learn more about them, then it makes it a lot easier down the road to be like, it's all good. Like if you make a mistake, you're my girl, we're fine. We can navigate that. Right. I think we are all so afraid because we're so separate from one another. And if we get a little closer and we choose to be more intentional with the way that we engage with people, I think that it almost eliminates that step that would set you up to be fearful about making a mistake. Because you're like, no, this person's going to understand where I'm coming from. I know it. Right.
Yeah. You have shared so many gorgeous nuggets of wisdom, but also just tactile tools that I hope, dear listener, you go back and perhaps like jot down just even one thing that you feel is tangible to just cultivate, discover, play around with, just to start, investigating. I'm so grateful to you for that. I would love just to give you the platform for a second and just like share, if people do want to get more involved in this work with all of you, or just you specifically, how within your own boundaries is the best way for people to do that?
Definitely. Would love to have several of you listening or watching join us in something called our New World program. It's a New World, essentially, that you join, of people who are meeting weekly. to engage in an accountability practice. I'm glad that that was the word that you were excited about, Jennifer, because accountability certainly is what we set up in these spaces. There are in-person and virtual opportunities available, plenty of resources. If you are interested in dismantling systemic oppression in your workplace and you want a community of people to join as they are also doing it, the New World program is for you. Lots of ability to track your habits and your success. And it's also just fun because you get to hang out with some great people. You can have your job pay for it as well. So that's the one thing I want to really encourage people. And if you're interested in some more intentional work with a contract, or if you are on a contract right now that you think might be interested, you can all reach out to us at info@harriettubmaneffect.com, or you can go to www.harriettubmaneffect.com and click the Engage with Us button.
All of that also, friends, will be in the show notes in case you didn't have a pen and paper handy. I am so grateful that we're now connected. The work that you do is so, so desperately important. And I love the way in which you make it feel accessible and doable, because again, it so often feels so daunting, and that we're somehow so behind the curve that how do you even catch up? And to make it feel tangible is the first way in which we can all hopefully push this world into a better place.
Yeah.
So thank you for making it digestible and approachable and graceful. You've offered that with just simply the way that you've shared it. And it's so evident with the way in which you live and operate in your own life. So I've already just seen that as like a little snippet. So thank you for showing up in this way. And I hope that we get to work together too. And
Please do.
Yeah. Thank you for all that you are doing and will continue to do. And hopefully our paths will continue to cross.
Oh, I'm sure they will. Thanks, Jennifer. Appreciate you.